todos e a todas. Estamos agora iniciando o nosso segundo painel do dia de hoje. Eu sou o João Ricardo, estou como secretário de controle externo da Previdência, Assistência e Trabalho.
Assistant and work. I'm going to be here in this afternoon as a moderator of this panel that we're going to talk about of Brazil experience to prevent, detect it, and correct the undue payment. Our panel will be composed by 4 speeches, 25 minutes each. And at the end of these speeches, we are going to have a question round and discussions with our speakers about the themes that we are going to talk about. And we are going to end at 5 p.m. The ones that have opportunity to watch this morning panel, we have a subject that was about our team today, talking about the United States model of payment integrity of the USA government.
This morning we had contact with the North American experience, and what stood out was what they dealt with, and especially to me, in the area of concentration of payments, and that's something that's important, that we have a gap here in terms of legal framework. And for those who had the opportunity to watch it, undue payments in around $10 million, and which are 1.5% of the area of the North American program budget. And the second idea is the payment of significant payments, which is the most important part of our North American colleagues that can have the amount of over $100 million. And that stood out because in our work, we started asking, when we talked about expenses such as pension expenses, which are close to 700 billion a year, we would start asking what was relevant, and which is around 1%, which is a very significant amount in absolute terms, and the North American experience. And the infralegal regulation, they say that it is a significant amount of money, of the work and the function on their part. And something else that really stood out for me is that many cases of the problems that they have in terms of undue payments are concerning the lack of access to the information by the managers of public policies, which are incorrect information or non-existent information that make it hard to control, and they are very dear topics to us, and we'll have the chance for our speakers to delve into them. And lastly, I would say that one of the highlights, the techniques that of our colleagues that mention elevated amounts in terms of 2021, which are close to $200 billion. They are very significant amounts, and the techniques of data crossing and the addressing of the issues that were dealt in this morning that were very relevant. And we'll also have the opportunity here to share with you all of the experience that we have here in Brazil concerning this topic. So here we're going to start the continuous part of personnel, and he's going to deal with this, which is the Director of Personnel, Ricardo, and the Secretary of Auditing and Payments here in TCU. Ricardo is also a post-graduation professor in machine learning and data science of the University Center of Brasilia, and he's a master in management of knowledge, and besides working in the science of computing sciences, or IT. Now I invite our colleague Ricardo to start his presentation about continuous auditing of personnel, and wishing him a great event to all of us on our afternoon. Good afternoon, João. As João has already mentioned, my name is Ricardo Aki, and I'm part of the Directory of Auditing of Personnel and of Payments and pension benefits and social benefits. Today I'm going to present a very relevant work of the Secretariat, which is the continuous auditing of the payment balance. So as the name itself says, in the investigation is a continuous one. We are in the 8th cycle of this auditing. Before I use the word auditing or overseeing, I want to talk about the relevance of this overseeing in terms of personnel. So this law here shows this law that was passed in the Senate. We can see here that if you remove the payment of debts, the payment of personnel is the second largest part of expenses of the federal government. And that can be even more tangible when we pay attention to the fact that the expenses with personnel is more than the health and education budget. So due to the relevance of this topic, it's very important for us to have actions that are connected to auditing or overseeing the payment of personnel. And before talking this overseeing process, we want to talk about the prerogatives in terms of constitution of the Federal Court of Accounts. And the constitutional mandate, the TCU has the attributes to analyze or acts and that arrive at TCU that report events in terms of the admission of every federal civil servant. Whenever one civil servant joins the civil servant, there's an act that is sent to TCU for the analysis to be made. Before this act here, another constitutional mandate is the analyze the act of pension and also reform in terms of military pension and pensions of retirement. So we're basically talking about the work life of the civil servants. One thing that I like to mention here is an important part is that the CEO has done for a long time is to analyze both the admission and also the removal. And between these two parts, when you act at the very beginning, it's a lot more effective than acting at the end. So think about a civil servant that was admitted 20 years ago, and then we think about their pension system. It takes, after 20 years, it's going to be much harder than at the very beginning. So the assessment or the overseeing of personnel and all of the every month we have to analyze the payroll and we have to act on this if there is any irregularity. Considering this and the importance of the overseeing and the analysis, and I'm going to talk about the basic cycle. This assessment is done yearly, and every month there are two stages. One is the obtainment of data. So we say that this assessment does massive analysis of data. And besides getting the data on a monthly basis, we have auditing tracks or auditing analysis that get this data to check whether there is any irregularity. After this analysis is done, the evidence of irregularity are forwarded to public managers so they can start this. And these public managers, they can check what is concrete and to check and to try and correct any problem. And or the manager can clear up any questions saying, you know what, this is actually a false positive, and we share this with the manager so they can analyze and they can check the consistency of this mistake, of this evidence. And then after the analysis, they go back to a team of TCU and they analyze the information that were provided by this team. This is the basic cycle on a monthly basis of this assessment. I talk in a very quick manner, and the idea is for us to go deeper into each one of them. Before we go deeper into one of them, it's important to mention that the scope of the audit can encompass 594 federal organizations. And how can it do this? Because it uses very intensive technology in terms of data crossing. Before that, TCU did in a very specific institution, only in that payroll, and then we move and we also can analyze the federal administration 360 degrees. We can analyze all the organizations and agencies of the federal government. And how do these data get to TCU? And what kind of data is received to perform this analysis? This data comes especially from SIAP, which is the special system of administration of personnel. It is a stable system. It is consistent. It has gone through many adaptations, and it is a very consistent and sturdy system, even though there might be some inconsistencies that are very isolated, but it's reliable. This system encompasses the payroll of all the organizations of the federal government here, and considering all of these payrolls are within the systems. And that's good because it's a standardized system. Many institutions and agencies use the system. And for the TCU to internalize this data, it's easier. But not all data from the federal public administration are within SIAP. So there is data that we internalize and we put in an area that is called extra or outside SIAP. For example, the judiciary branch are not within the SIAP, TSC, TST, TCU is not, and Câmara dos Deputados or House of Representatives in the Senate are not within SIAP. And that makes it hard to obtain data because each system and agency has their system and their structure of data. And for TCU to standardize all of this data, we managed to evolve a lot, but what happens is that on a monthly basis, the institutions that are not within SIAP, they send us the data, their payroll data, following a pre-established manner. If you are not within SIAP, you can join it. And besides this, we have partnerships with TCUs from municipalities and states so that they can share with us the payrolls of them, because TCU doesn't have the autonomy to ask the payroll of a municipality, of a town hall. And with the municipality that we have, and in a way that they send us this payroll data and as a benefit, they can use the technological infrastructure that we have so that they can spot any inconsistencies. For example, if a civil servant is in two different civil spots or civil places, government places, we can send this information to the state of Minas, and they plan the best way to act on that information. So it's a relation gain-gain. They send the data in a way that TCU will be able to increment the analysis, and they can use the infrastructure of TCU to improve the analysis. And besides the municipal and state ones, we have auxiliary bases such as the Superior Electoral Court and the number of deaths. So there is a series of bases that can also be used by our team. And all of this goes to Contas, which is a virtual environment in which the auditors they can access, and TCU auditors they can access it, and they have some tools that are available to perform the auditing process. So we have Python installed, and we have tools for data crossing. So it makes it easier for auditors to work with this crossing of data. And monthly we receive this data. And once that this data are in our possession, we do the analysis, computational analysis that allow us to spot these irregularities. And last year, we had 39 analyses of auditing and that identify irregularities. They're classified into 9 categories. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm going to mention a few so it makes it easier for us to understand. So we have audits that can check whether there is a food benefit that a civil servant that is receiving twice the food benefit, or other benefits and payments that are being made towards deceased servants. So the civil servant has died and the money is being put into his account. And other situations of overpayment, considering the constitutional limits, and 2 positions within the government which are illicit. And this is what's the most important part, because a civil servant is not going to be in 2 government positions. They know that there is a cross-referencing and cross-communication between the spheres. So it's easier for a civil servant to have a position in the state and a job in the federal government. So, and this also happens. So the data is received. The 39 analyses are performed, and the evidence is sent for clearing. In this screen here, I'd like to show these 2 last stages, both the sending of the evidence for the manager and the return of this information. As I mentioned, we have the robots that do the 39 steps of auditing, and they are activated at the beginning, and any evidence that they have irregularity, they activate the module evidence, which is the most important module, and this exclusive module for registration of this audit. And each irregularity here goes to the system, and each public agency access the system here. The central bank accessed the system, and the Central Bank of Brazil managed to identify that the TCU has spotted irregularity, and we identify this evidence, and the team was able to check this. The units that within this jurisdiction, they act to the system, and they manage the situation. So each one of these units analyze this. It's a very hard work for all of them to have access. So all of this, and they access the system, and they check. And the TCU says, you know what, I analyzed this evidence, I already stopped paying, and you can check this. And you can say, you know what, TCU, this is not a concrete evidence. There was a mistake in the analysis. So that is a very strong information for us to improve our auditing process. So this information are registered in the module evidence, and once these units they provide this explanation, we have our auditing group that will analyze each one of these explanations. So the auditor will go through the analysis and say, you know what, this is pertinent, or say, no, this is not really pertinent, this explanation, so I need to send it back to the unit that is analyzing. And something that we'd like to say is that when the evidence seems to be okay, it's under monitoring. So basically, it's put under quarantine, and the assessment cycle changed, and then we do perform this analysis again to see if there was something, and if the new cross analysis identified that this problem was not solved, it goes back to the analysis of the auditor. Another topic that is also important to analyze is that before, every evidence was analyzed by the auditor, and this started to become a bottleneck, and we didn't have this information to do the analysis of all of this evidence to analyze in all. So we developed also the robots to perform this analysis in an automatic manner. And if the manager says, you know what, the problem of double jobs and of the civil servants, the robot will analyze whether the response was consistent or not. If it's not, it sends it back to the analysis. I would say that all of this information is being analyzed, and that is being assessed by the team.
This is the dynamic of the evidences analysis. I'm going to show some results. I would like to highlight these results are, in fact, a thank you to the use of technology. And the cycle of 2021, the monitoring cycle, if you have all the payrolls that were monitoring 28 billions of reais through month. In 2021, at the end of the seventh circle, we identify 80,000 new evidence that was shared by the managers, and you will see that we have to manage this evidence because some managers, they demand a manager to analyze all this evidence sent by TCU. Through this, we identify, and the years before, we identified just in 2021, we have the residual ones. But in 21, the managers decided they resolve 25,000, and we have savings of 490 million by year because this undue payment lasts in time. If you can suspend some aids, like food aids, and TCU did not evaluate for a while, so only 21 we have this aid estimative that we stop the payment. One thing that the managers do is the pay back to the treasurer. If you have double payment, we stop the payment, and then we have the reimbursement that was done before referring to this double payment. And this amount, it's count on the stopping of the payment. And those are the results of the monitoring. In a very summarized way, I showed you the 4 stages, and to show how good could be this monitoring. We have 5 people here, and we use technology, and it's allowed 5 people to do a more wide analysis. So to close, I like to show the historical, because a lot of people think that I want to start this kind of work, and people want to start in the art state, have all the data, have a qualified team. That's not so common, so I like to show this historic that to get in this level, we still have a lot to improve. We have a lot of bottlenecks and that we need to improve. But I like to show in 2015, the first cycle of monitoring, we received the payrolls for 1 month of the public entities, and it was a record. We asked for the payrolls about 1 month, and this payroll arrived to us in an Excel spreadsheet, and then we did that analysis and give the file back to the units under jurisdictions, and we have over 200 spreadsheets with every answer. So we start in a very precarious way, and we had good results. In 2017, the monitoring evolved. We did not analyze that by spreadsheet. We developed an information system in which the data were sent through the system. So we had a structure layout, the organization's access, and then send just about the payroll of the month, and then we cross the data. In 2018, with the maturing of this system, we asked for the to receive this data monthly. So we start to analyze all the payrolls of every month. In 2019, following this mature system, we got managing panels that allow us to see a holistic views, not just to attack the undue payments. We saw some evidence that occur in the executive branch, and then we could propose structural solutions. So this panel allowed us to have more good solving for that. 2020, we got robots to analyze in an automatic way the clarification. In 2021, with the robots and the volume of bigger amounts than the beginning, we intensify the communication with the units, and we have more communication channels. We have an email that receives several messages daily. We did some workshops with some units to have their perception and see the other side to improve, and also start to be more incisive in the charges. In 2020, we have the evidences that we should monitor. In 2021, we are more rigid with the body that did not clarify in time. And in 2022, we are fighting to have the e-social data is a system that is going to have all the information, so we are not going to have CIAP or each court data. We have the central channel, which make our work easier and make the manager work easier, because we would not receive the data monthly. And this process is not simple, it's not common. We have several complexities, but we are working to drop these barriers so we can internalize this data and implement the monitoring and the payroll management as a role. And also, other thing that we are doing this year, we talked about the analysis of Personnel Act, which is the dismissal of the employees. We are integrating that, and when we have a retirement document, we analyze just the document, and now the auditor analyze the data and analyze the personal data, has an integration with the continuous monitoring, and then can see a historical of that server in the continual monitoring. So it's something else to see the document. We have information complement that can support the management and the evidence in the monitoring payroll. Was quick. I just want to give you an overview. This is are my contacts. If you want to talk, this is my personal email from TCU, ricardo.akl@tcu.gov.br. We are available if you have any doubts through these communication channels. We are available to help and talk about your doubts. I thank you the opportunity, and I'm going to wait to make a debate at the end. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ricardo. It was very interesting to see your work evolution is an exponential improvement. So we cannot think about to have Excel spreadsheets. So the challenge that you said, you put the statistics, 80,000 evidence of irregularity, and in automatic way we can solve 7%, and 30% of them need to treat that manually. So a 30% is not a little. We have a lot to do. I'm sure that the evolution is very big, and you do the best way. You're going to do that in a very good way. Thank you very much for your presentation. My pleasure. So now we are going to talk about the expenses with human resource, and we are going to talk about social benefits with Rodrigo, that working in the semi-secretary. He is a director and treating about the regularity of the expenses of social benefits. He's graduated and an engineer with MBA in represented auditing, has an experience.
It's now with you, Rodrigo. Thank you for your presence here and for sharing with us your knowledge. First, I'd like to thank everyone for the invitation, and I'd like to share my presentation with you. You say that we are in the same secretariat, right? But we're not only in the same secretariat, we're in the same room. Our rooms are very close to each other. So we try to share ideas and technologies as well. It's a more recent one. I was in Egypt, and the continuous auditing of social benefits, and you may know that was in Express, and we started this work of continuous auditing of benefits, and that's where the methodology was created. If I speak too fast, you can slow down, right? Unfortunately, the interpreter is saying that it's not possible to slow down for us, but anyway. First, I'd like to mention the context, right? Do you have the presentation? The first thing is the material aspects. When we talk about social benefits, we're talking about a world. So today, providence assistance and work, they are close to 70%. So we're talking about a very high volume. So we're also talking about social assistance and people that are very vulnerable, and over 30 million payments that are being made every month. And we know that every kind of control, be it within the internal control of or the external control, the impact in the life of people is direct. It's not from my time, but you probably remember the big lines in the INSS in terms of a benefit revision, where people had to prove that they were still alive. They had to go in person. We didn't have the virtual assessment. When we talk about data, we have to be careful to not do this happen again, and it won't impact negatively the lives of people. But it's important for us to look here to see that this relevance has a big encompasses a lot of things here. And for example, it helps. There are many benefits that are provided, such as sick benefits, and now we have to the taxi drivers and truck drivers as well. They are very common, but at the same time, they're very specific, right? One thing that they have in common is that they pay a physical person or an individual in a way that is quicker and more timely. We cannot take too long. For example, unemployment benefit. If we do this, so when we think about controlling it, it's already done. We have to be careful about it, and this started in 2010. Apps, we were talking about data audits, which were traditional ones. And usually we had very multidisciplinary teams of the court, and we talked to CEPI, which was another unit that was specialized in IT tools. So we had meetings and agreements, and we did a work that involved and specific equipment, and it resulted in very good and we had very rare occasions in which to do this, and so we have an agreement, a decision that was considered a paradigm, and we realized that the giving of the benefits involved a lot of systems and technology, and it would have impact in the granting of the benefits. So we realized the importance of this topic, which was the analysis of data and social benefits. So after that, we started specializing and to specialize our skills within the team itself. Here we have the civil servants. These are the three auditors there that we're representing in the picture. And what was the main benefit here, main advantage? We went to an institution, we got a balance, and we said, you know what are all the benefits, the pensions that were granted in 2012 in February? So we got the information, and we put it in the serve, and we ran a lot of tests for many months analyzing it. And after that, there was a report that would come out, but there were reports that happened over time. So in 715, the agreement, and 1857, 2014, and 666 in 2013, in terms about related to pensions and incapacity, pensions due to incapacity, and pensions to deaths. And what was important back then? We were saying that within the team and the technical team, we had people with different profiles. One understood from one area, and the other one understood from the legal area. We could come up with a good report, especially considering compliance and using database. And we had also the analysis of data within the process. So it's important here that within this analysis, we had the ACL, and we got to some important information, and we used it in Excel. And we considered all of the states, and we looked at the physical procedures. So at the very end, we got a very high accuracy of findings. There were very strong evidence, the in situ verification or audit. But after that, we realized that we could work on this. And that's something that I'm going to explore a little bit more. So we're talking about teams that are more connected to data, and data, which is the main profile. But we cannot forget that we are not alone. So we cannot talk about a benefit audit without thinking about the statistic part and many other areas that involve it. So we can think about this different softwares in terms of data analysis. They are very important that are not specific to audit. And we are talking about the evidence in terms of investigation process. Until we are really sure, we have the manager closer to us, so we show this evidence. And then the manager, since he is closer to the topic and is more experienced with the detail and the systems and information, he's able to say, you know what, this is an evidence, so let's look at it and they can do something better. That is a more mature process, and from 2015, we had over 18 sentences and in each one of these areas here, private social assistance, work, and assistance also as well. And what is this continuous audit of benefits? I have two worlds here. At the left, we have this CRISP DM, which is the data analysis model for us to, when we prepare to have more specific machine learning. And also we have the other planning, execution, and report, which is considered, for example, the compliance auditing, operational audit, and the follow-up, which is the MO of the auditor. When we consider both of them, and we actually have the continuous audit of benefits, and it has many different stages within it. We start from the understanding of the business and data, and the legislation that are within it, and that are available. And after that, we get the data, and we have a strong involvement of the IT sector for the following stage, which is to obtaining the data and preparing the data. I'm going to talk about in further detail into this, and the analysis of data until we get to analyze the evidence and the checking of the evidence. At the end, we conclude the work and we come up with the follow-up proposals. The last part, which is the automation, it's not a stage in itself. It happens throughout the other stages. And it was very clear in his presentation that we're also talking about how to improve this for future cycles. And this is a process that we have to think about the feedback part. So within these stages, I'm going to highlight the three ones. Data preparing. What is data preparing? We get a database and we look at it. And when they are at hand, we assess the credibility or the reliability of the data. And there is not a quality basis. So we actually have to check what the court has been deciding and the data science is analyzing here. I put here the word in brackets quality because that's a word that is used in academia. We created these characteristics and with consistency, unity, validity, and accuracy, uniformity to analyze something that is very subjective, which is quality. After we identify where we are, because this picture here shows very clearly, if you have garbage at the entrance or a garbage in, it'll have garbage out. So you need this initial effort, and besides the credibility or reliability, we need the hygienic aspects of the data, which also the enriching of the bases. Basically, we need a more elaborate or sophisticated process for at the end for us to have aggregated value. And we can get some findings here when we have a good preparation of data. We have this typologies of registry. The first example is CPF, or the national registration number. And so the first thing, it's to find RG or CPF, we have to check. We have to check whether there is more than one CPF for one person, the validity of the CPF, and if those numbers make sense, or if it's just 191, but it's mathematically viable, but it doesn't belong to anyone. The consistency and accuracy, and we start checking them against other databases, especially the one from the Brazilian IRS. And the difference between consistency and accuracy, it's a much more technical term, and I'm not going to delve into it. After that, we're going to talk about the analysis, which is the most important part of our work, and Ricardo mentioned the typologies of the development of the auditing analysis. And when you have a legal regulation that says you cannot earn as much as this, you cannot go over, and then you select all of the registrations that are going over this limit that are established by law. So, and there are typologies that are a lot more complex, for example, because when you have many other analyses, you can, for example, it might not be the same person. It might be the person within a database that has their maiden name and the other one their married name. So, and you have to find sometimes you need to have more sophisticated analysis in terms of the analysis, and then the typology of businesses, which are closer to the evidence. And when the registry typology shows a problem here, and the business, not really. It might show a fraud or irregularity as well. And here we have a connection to the presentations of yesterday, and it shows how the data analysis gets to the situation in terms of compliance and the data. Here we're showing the quality indicators. For example, a registry, if it has very low quality, for the concession of benefits, the concession will be very low, and there will be a lot of frauds and undue payments as that will be made as well. And also the power of detection of typologies, which is for us to start to encompass all the typologies that is provided for by law, and we have 10 items that is there. If you manage to look at 9, you have a lower percentage in terms of detection. So you're not really sure that all of the cases are regular, and so this detection is really important. And the undue payments that are themselves, for example, when you have these typologies and in the registry, you get to the irregularity of this public policy. I mean, the problem of the public policy. I'm going to go through the verification of the evidence of irregularity. Here I put a matrix of confusion. Have you heard of it? Have you seen it? And here you can identify what a hot dog is. And then you can find what it is in a hot dog and what is not a hot dog. And the white one is the one is considered one and one is not considered. That is kind of a joke, but I said, for example, imagine that the person died, and actually the person didn't die. And so the manager stops the payment, and the person needs that money. So that is a false positive, right? How do we deal with that? So we always try to have an alignment between the teams to minimize this false positive and to manage for the evidence to be close to the evidence that we show. So this divergence is not that big. And lastly, I talk about the pros and cons. Why doing this and other situations connected to other public policies? So the pros are we have to check the millions of payments, and that for itself shows the importance. And people have, Jean Paul also mentioned this. But think about this. We have to go over 36 million payments of the INSS, or the Social Security. And it's a very heavy, even hard work. Another pro is to get the manager, the public manager, closer to the knowledge. Before we had longer procedures, so it was hard for us to do this before, but then it took, like, the situation was 6 months old or 1 year old, but now we can use the database that is closer to our reality, the current reality. These are repetitive tests, or that can be replicated. So you can check an undue payment after the death here in the Social Security, and they have the same idea in another one. And why check this? So it's possible for us to replicate this test here. I'll talk about it in details. And also the follow-up, which is a bit more technical in terms of external control. I'm not going to go into it. And the counters, or the cons. And we have to deal with the IT here and a robust IT. We also need a multidisciplinary team in terms of IT, statistics, because if one of the tripod is not strong enough, we won't be able to do a good work. It's important to have a balance between the three parts. We need bases of high quality. That's why our wish list. But you need this quality because everything that we do in the new policy is to check whether the data is good enough. Because if they're not, that's the first finding. We have to improve the quality. And how do we do this? And we had many possibilities to do that. And another con is the evidentiary character. Until we get to the evidence and to be sure, when you're dealing with some techniques of data analysis, you don't have this kind of certainty. How can I put it? That is so specific, right? So it's important for you to look at it. And we had the emergency benefit, right, which is the FCB in the emergency aid, because nobody expected to have a pandemic here. And when we had the pandemic hit, we needed to make a decision very quickly. And here in the court, we created an FCB that is specific, which is this TC 016834 from 2020. And these were the decisions with the benefits. And all of these benefits here, the emergency benefit, the residual emergency benefit, and the one from 2021. And it impacted so that there would be an integrated technology. It was important to check this. And the first time we saw the benefit, and we saw that there was one only criteria to start, and there was an internal discussion about whether it made sense or not. So we brought this information in the appellate decision, and the following decision, this criteria was considered of the law, and every month the criteria would be reassessed in terms of the payment and of eligibility to know whether the person would be able to get or not that benefit. So, and that was already common in the FCB, but it was something novel due to the situation. And here we also have the number of people that are affected, 600,000, 400,000. It's a very high number. And of course, undue payments as well, which is close to 2.9 billion reais. This is not new. All of this data has already been debated in TCU. If you want to check all of the information, you can send for us, and you can send us in, and we'll be able to provide this information. So, typology usually goes down, and the numbers keep changing. So for example, that shows a few possibilities in the future and how we are going through this. Maybe systematization, automation, integration with other topics, and continuous evolution, as well as the instrument and induction of the manager. What is the systematization? Is it replicability? We're talking about topologies that can be exported and systems that are ever more specialized, and to think in a broader way. And the automation is basically the cost reduction. We have to do this more and more, especially considering this information and with more and more typologies. Other topics. We can talk about multidimensional public policies, and especially here that we think about all of this, what we're doing here, it makes sense. And another topic, which is continuous evolution. We're talking about 3 points here. When we talk about FCB, we want to involve new bases, because these are the bases that we have been assessing here, and the social, and there is a rule in the basis, and we check the new typology and new techniques. For example, we always had a match whether two bases were the same people, same person, or if there was just a coincidence of name. And what if we use phonetically or a specific software? So each one of these changes, they shake up the system so we can think of different ways to improve the control. And I believe that what's most important is the induction and instrumentalization of the manager. And when we talk about this, we have databases that they don't have, that were mentioned in the municipalities that we have. So with that, we managed to show a possible path, and we try to work as a driver of internal control. So sometimes we can use a list of control with the algorithm that we used. And the idea here is for us to stop with continuous auditing, and we can reduce it more and more, and it'll be just residual in the machine, right? And we can think of different ways to act. Here is my contact information, and CFIP as well. You can check and get in touch with us here in our secretariat, and you can send us an email. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rodrigo, for sharing your experiences with us and continuous audits of social benefits. I liked your pictures, right? They're really good. I highlight here in your slides one of the cons of audit. You can also have a con in terms of the finality, but you can also contribute for this basis. So you work at the two ends, improving the reliability of the registry and also using the registry to check the eligibility criteria. And something here that I would like to highlight is the need to strengthen the feedback that Ricardo mentioned. So since you're mentioning today, right, Ricardo, you can have the algorithms of feedback. So jokes aside, we know that it's really important because social benefits are really, really important. And also the analysis of personnel, it's harder, it's more organized in the system, and especially the benefits, they don't have this information, and it makes this work harder. And for us to analyze the evidence that are available and to turn this evidence into also this into evidence. We know what the work that is being used to this that you mentioned before, right? And you also mentioned something important about structuring actions. And we see that after the benefit is payment, it's very, very hard for us to get the reimbursement back, especially the first payment, right? And the audit is justified by itself, and that alone makes it worthwhile. And also, it's really hard to get the money back. And the structuring actions, I remember that you talked about the analysis of data previ and for the criteria to run the eligibility criteria in a monthly manner. And a series of beneficiaries that were accessed and that will be contemplated with this. Logically, all of this, and with the control not only from our part, but from the CGU, the National Controller's Office, and in terms of the emergency as well, in a very decisive way, the analysis of these benefits that will contribute to all of this. All of these payments that are granted by our sister institution, represented by Eliane, right? It's very good to have you here with us. And Eliane is the Director of Concession of Benefits and Pension Policies in the National Controller's Office. And starting in 2019, she's a graduate in chemical engineering and also in engineering, and also specialized in public policies by ENAP. These are her credentials of Eliane that's here with us to share with us her knowledge about the auditing of benefits based on data of the National Controller's Office. Eliane, feel free. Thank you very much for your presence here. To start presentation. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to go slowly because people who know me know that I speak really fast. So thank you very much for the invitation. It's something that you have mentioned. We are partners. We have been working together. Many works, joint works, and sometimes sharing or planning as well. I did made a lot of appointments here, and both from Ricardo and Rodrigo, and I'm going to leave them to connect to this information later. So I'm going to talk about this specific work that is carried out in Directory of Concession of Benefits and of the National Controller's Office and CGU, and it's a part that is done by the Concession of Benefits in our directory. And we deal with a few benefits, those benefits that are of a higher amount. They are dealt with in the directory, and they're connected to what Ricardo and Rodrigo mentioned, for us to get recognition, scale, and power, and concerning what we learned for one benefit that is used by others. So I'm going to save on words, so usually I bring some information that is important for us. When we talk about the benefits that are granted by the directory that of which I'm part, we talk about the benefits that are close to 780 billion reais, and social benefits that is paid by the Ministry of Citizenship, Bolsa Família and Auxílio Brasil. Bolsa Família doesn't exist anymore, but it was followed by us. And now we have the program Auxílio Brasil that is overseen by us. And this is a continuous benefit of 77 billion reais every year, and the emergency benefit as well that I wanted to mention here as a unit. And Rodrigo also mentioned there are three different benefits: the emergency benefit and the residual one that were paid in 2020, and the emergency that were paid in 2021. 2021, these years we paid 350 billion reais and 310 billion just in 2020. So it was an overload of payments and work. Probably Rodrigo remembers that very well. We had in 2010, we were in quarantine and working really hard due to all of the benefits that were being paid here. And I talked about the emergency benefit, but I'm going to talk about the labor benefits as well. And when we talk, let's talk about the work or labor benefits. And we have the FIS insurance and the emergency benefit of keeping maintenance. They are 43 billion reais a year, the first ones. And the emergency benefit and for keeping income is 40 billion reais. And here I have the taxi driver and truck drivers benefits. And here I wanted to talk about this in CGU on how these works have impacted and have made us to given us a different look on public policy. So when we talk about the emergency benefit, and we had to provide in a specific manner, and the fact that we had to do it over a specific time also gave us some obligations and some difficulties. So sometimes we lost in precision, and we gained in agility and timely manner for the payment. So I believe that this issue is very important for us to have it. And because when we talk about CGU, we are talking about the internal control of the federal executive branch. So we do not take part in the management. We have decisions that are under our responsibility, but we do have the duty to be close to the managers and to have a look from the current perspective of the controls, so the managers can make qualified and better decisions. So we have this perspective in the directory in CGU, but also in our directory. We are talking about the directories and all of these benefits here. In the same line of what Rodrigo mentioned and Ricardo himself mentioned, I also have a timeline here of the works that were carried out, because there are a lot, and 3 a year for us to go into further detail. But I also share what the Ricardo and Rodrigo talked about, the way we did this traffic and of the federal government, and we had 2 items that were we had to register, and CDs and DVDs, and we got a lot of information of the Social Security payroll, and we opted for CDs and DVDs with this information. And more recently, also this data. As Rodrigo mentioned, and Ricardo too, we have a flow of what this data, how this data gets to CGU and how they are treated in a different area, and CGU data, where this data is stored for the use of all of the area of CGU. And this naturally gives us an evolution that is very big, because this data are not manipulated as they used to be in a very precarious way. So here, as I mentioned, I bring some of the benefits to put them into context, as Rodrigo and Ricardo mentioned. I started in 2017 when I was ahead of the other directory of the social area as well, but also that talked about, that dealt with the Social Security as well. In 2017, we talked about how benefits were, the pension benefits were within the general regime. And it was carried out in 2017 and also in 2019 later. A very similar work and the same typology was used. And in 2017, we had 31,000 cases. In 2019, 22,000. So we can show how effectively we have the reduction over time. And aggregated to this, I have another perspective. We need to understand when we have this information how the other institutions deal with this information, how they internalize this in their work routine, so that we can improve our processes and how we can contribute in the management of a federal government in relation to how people are dealing with this. This is the work that was made in 2017, and I highlight, and there was an accumulation of the benefits within the general regime, and it shouldn't do this because it's from the INSS and it depends on other agencies of the government. In 2018, I mentioned a work that was made of Bolsa Família, and we have this information here. It's a matter of logic, and these two benefits cannot be paid at the same time. And the benefit that will be suspended is Bolsa Família because it had a smaller amount than the one of Defeso. And this current rule was also applied to Auxílio Brasil benefit. So the idea here is there are three agencies because Bolsa Família is payment by the Ministry of Citizenship. Defeso is paid is an unemployment insurance for a specific category of workers, but it involves the Ministry of Labor. And there is another part that involves the Secretariat of Fishing of the Ministry of Agriculture. So there are three agencies that are involved, and it's a benefit that should be canceled, which is Bolsa Família. There is more stable, that is paid over time. Defeso is another benefit that is more specific, only during Defeso time, or the non-fishing, the time when people cannot fish. And the payroll is generated in the Ministry of Labor. So this difficulty of accessing information in a timely manner, and it can be sent from one time to another. It makes it possible for many payments to be done at the same time. And I showed here in 2019, we started this work in 2018 with a very specific cohort and with different payments. And what stood out the most back then, it was an amount of flow and the understanding about how that was understood, and it led the payments to continue being made, and there was an improvement, but a residual one. And in 2021, there was a change in the suspension of payments, and the suspensions were not made, and they are made after 2022, and that is an issue that we're following. 2019, we have a work which is post-death payment, and we had made this in 2017, and the result here is very expressive. There are over 130,000 payments that were made to beneficiary of people who had, after people had died, and with a big number of people, because there is a logic that we have to follow in terms of the identification of the death when there was an identification. And also in 2019 we had 22,000 beneficiaries, and it went to 130,000 to 22,000. So there was a very big change in this logic, and that is very relevant. So in 2017, 18, and 19, I basically mentioned benefits that are pension benefits, and I'm going to talk about the other ones, which are health benefits or assistential benefits and work benefits. And something that is connected to what Rodrigo mentioned as well, in 2019, INSS decided to implement a system of follow-up and previous check of benefits of irregularity evidence, so or probable cause. And so we could internalize this for CGU and TCU as well. So in 2019, we realized that it was a moment for us to follow up on this in a different manner, to check how the system was being implemented, how these analyses, they were being internalized by the managers, in what manner they were being done like this, and they were being done with the undue payments. And that has connected to what Rodrigo mentioned when he said that the improvement of processes of the managers would result in changes in our workflow. And that's exactly what we have in 2017 and 19. I'm bringing some examples here of pension benefits. We also have work benefits. And in 2020-22, we were focusing on different benefits. So we could understand what were the benefits like. And for us to work in more structural issues, starting with the identification of problem of quality of data, as how to understand this information, how to understand the access to the system, in what way that would impact the processes of work, who is accessing the system, in what way, and also we talk about benefits, and we also look at the follow-up of this data here. And we also use this as a subsidy for the other works, as considering what Rodrigo mentioned. When we mention 2020, the emergency aid or benefit, we have the emergency benefit for keeping job and income, and BDC. Why did I do this? Why did I show the three of them? The two benefits that were paid out in 2020, the emergency and the residual one, they caused a huge impact in our actions, and Rodrigo mentioned this, and the logic of work that is very different. So it was no use to do this, but the best work at the end of 2020, when the whole payment would be made. And also we tried to do our best work supporting the management and in a timely manner. So as some of these were not made, some of the criteria were not checked, but all of the relevant criteria according to our view and perspective, and that were possible to be treated with in a fast way. There was an issue also that they were dealt, and there was, Rodrigo and Ricardo also mentioned that we managed to do this in a very specific way, which was information from civil servants. And this agreement of that with TCU, and that was something that impacted, and there was something and that we said, and we talked to TCU about it, and we mentioned this in terms to the micro entrepreneurs. And that was more or less what we were talking about and how we would make the most of the situation. Concerning the emergency aid or benefit, the idea was that we had and we could use it as to benefit, to make the decisions. And Rodrigo mentioned this very often. And when there is an evidence of this and the criteria that was used, there was a type of validation that they had to do to adopt a providence or a measure, maybe to suspend the benefit or to get reimbursement in the future, specifically concerning the emergency benefit. And for the audience of Bolsa Família, and the decision of the manager was kind of facilitated because it was a payment that was made by a beneficiary that didn't ask this. So the position of the Ministry of Citizenship was, as they got the results, they stopped the payments, and after that, the beneficiary would have to prove that they needed that benefit. They were eligible. And I also talked about BEM or BEM because it was a benefit that was very different. It was a work benefit, but at the same time, it demanded work with another ministry, the Ministry of Economy, and a benefit that was executed by the Ministry of the Secretariat of Work, but it had specific characteristics. We worked within the logic in a much smaller way, and whatever we could internalize the best possible and the sooner possible, better. And the BPC was something that I mentioned here because we managed to do this in this work starting in 2021 to stop payments of benefits that were undue. That's something that had a lot of evidence, not only with CGU, but TCU as well, of undue payments, and the managers could not take the proper decisions. And in 2021, they could have started having these results and the installments. And we are going to the crossing here, and also the payments that were canceled, and to improve our work. And for us to understand better, right? And in 2021, the help benefit, the benefit that followed the same logic here, something that Rodrigo talked about, the incorporating all of the improvements that we showed, both in TCU in 2020. We went from 58 million to 68 million beneficiaries of the emergency benefit to 39 million of the 2021.
So this was by the refining of the policy for the new limits that were included in a norm, as Rodrigo said, and I mentioned the work of and it has the results incorporated in the financial audit, as Rodrigo said, which was a tendency to incorporate these works, but not only because of that, because it reflects in 22. I'm going to talk about later. The emergency benefits and has the results in the Ministry of Citizenship. So as Rodrigo said, we incorporate that. Since 2020, I'm going to start by the end, the work that we did in 21, we had pointed several questions in which the work secretary said that a lot of them were solved in a new system of the salary bonus and a new process of the operationalization of the system. So we have a consultancy work of this payment bonus. We did not do not identify the undue payments, but we have a support of the management with this look of how much these improvements in systems and process could handle to face questions that were identified in the past. The Brazil bonus, we have a work that is currently being doing. It replaced Bolsa Família. We are in the middle of the work, and it's a work that's in the line. And the trucker and the taxi driver came to break the paradigms, in which we did previous analysis of the norms and contributing to the management so they could incorporate with the look of internal control related to the norms. We could cross data with the list, receive the list of the autonomous transportations and taxi drivers, and the payments doing to truck drivers and taxi drivers. So all the paradigm were broken doing this job that was focused to support the management as we need to the internal control body. This is an overview of the works that we've been doing. So I will go to the last slide. I'm going to talk about something that I already said something before. A question that, as Ricardo and Rodrigo mentions, challenge databases in all the senses: quality, how to receive, how to storage, which are the databases. It's related to the next item, the public policies. When I'm going to talk about the bonus to the taxi driver, something that no one else did, and this profession has regular guidelines. So we need to know what basis we need to do if I don't know the policies. We need to know the policies and understand how these policies are overput, how they guide, use one and other, and how can the manager can communicate, and to have value to the public management. We have this duty as an internal control body, and the other item, previous evaluations at the same time and a posterior evaluation. We do all these evaluations as we do and always try to have the best result in the time that's needed to the management. So I bring the results saying that when we can bring these evaluations with trust, what's necessary in the right time, we can bring the best result the internal control can deliver to the manager with information that is a base for make decision. It is related to something that Rodrigo and Ricardo said. We identified the undue payment issues, but we don't own the solution and don't know as the auditors know. This result delivered to the managers make possible the adoption of the providences to improve the public policies. That's it that I wanted to say. I hope I didn't speak very quickly. I know that I did because there's something that I do natural, but I speak too much, I know. And I think it's an overview. I think that's very clear. integrated act, the internal and external control. And every time that we can walk side by side and sharing our knowledge, our difficulties, like e-social, like Ricardo mentioned, is something that's necessary. So I think that's it. I'm available for your needs to clarify something. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your excellent presentation. I confess that I thought it's not you. We met a lot, and you spoke very slowly. It was very, very good to understand the overview. Something I didn't know that we started in a structured way since 2017. So it's a very quick evolution, 5 years only, and you are doing high-level work. And also, I saw the care with the internalization of the procedures. I think it's the role of the control, what affects the internal control. We want to contribute to that. We don't want to see any mistakes. We want that to work in the best way. And the care that you have with that to help the structure the body, the INSS, that you participate of the decrease through 2017, 2019. It was a very important advance. And also, we are always in contact to share plannings, our works. We are going to do soon other work round, and it's always a pleasure to hear and learn. I remember an auditing about the bonus that you did. I was reading your report, and I showed to my team that worked with this kind of work, and the care of the follow-up and the internalization of the procedures, the improvement of the contract relations to solve and address these problems. Very good. Now we are going to go to another world. We talked about data crossing, about the administrative registration, like in the federal payroll of the INSS, the mass. It's a mass payroll of INSS. The social benefits, assistant benefits, is something that the government manages. Rodrigo, our three speakers, Ricardo, Rodrigo, Eliane, talked about the limitation of data, of the registration data. We don't have all the data that we would like to have. And relating to the morning presentation, the U.S. government said that it's the mainly cause of the undue payment, the lack of some information, and the lack of data in databases. Our teams thought in the last years in a different way to look at this data. In a certain way, leaving the administrative registration and taking the IBG researches. I don't know, it's by trimesters, but we have this national research of samples by homes that IBG's goes in the citizen's home. We are having that nowadays. We have this information that's different from the registration, and it's free from mistakes. The citizen is going to inform, so we don't think we are going to have a mistaken information. So the citizen is going to give the information as he understands. So the IBGs has his own methodology to make the questions that are very carefully studied, and then the citizen can answer in the most accurate way. So to see that, I'm going to give an example of a judgment that we have here in the court. For example, in the case of the emergency bonus assistance, there were something telling about the woman that were in the head of the family to receive 600 reais. So instead of receive 600 reais, they should receive 1,200 reais because she was the head of the family. If she wasn't the head of the family, she would receive 600 reais. But this information, it's not in the registration of the federal government, except from the research of IBG. As we had this rule in some laws, the citizens, when he informed that to receive the bonus, the benefit, he could say something that wasn't true to receive other benefits, a double quote. So this was a possibility, a hypothesis that could happen. We didn't verify by administrative registration. We verified that by the census information or sample information. This way to work, it's a comparison between IBG information and registration information from the federal government. So crossing this information, we could see if they have any mistakes. So this is our theme, the estimative of undue payments. Giuseppe is going to talk about in this occasion. Giuseppe worked in the Secretary of Controlling of Pension Entity of Brazil. He's graduated in statistics and worked in IBG from 10 years. He's a large experience about samplers and data analysis and estimatives, and another area that Giuseppe is contributing is the estimative of authorial liabilities. So the floor is yours to talk about the estimatives of undue payments. Thank you, João. talking from what you said, our perspective is a little bit different. We are trying to make an analysis, the benefits from the other sides. The first thing that I would like to say, in these studies that I'm going to present, we don't have the crossing data identified. So we had no idea who were the people that were receiving undoing payments, so we can cancel that. Was not this focus of this analysis. We obviously know that is perfect. We have our failures, but we can consider we are here in the other way that has its advantages and disadvantages. Disadvantages. We are going to talk about the big number of the public policy execution. What should be. We are not focusing on seek. Who are the people? It's just the execution. When we do that, we are going to seek for failures in the politics design and in the time that it was implemented by the manager. We have bases to send to the National Congress, not only to the executive, and talk about the design of the policy. What could be changed in the law, and try to make that this public policy could be more efficient to decrease the poverty, which I'm going to talk about, that reach more the people that need more and had more expectation. This is the first clarification that I want to make. The three works that were presented. Our idea, we want to see the big numbers that are executed by the public policy, how many payments were made, and look the profile of the people inside this public policy that will be assisted by incomes or another characters, and compare this information. As João said, our research by samples in IBG, talking about this research, it's made by IBGE. Currently, we have results by trimesters. We have monthly results, but it's planned to present results in the trimesters. And we had an annual disclosure, which is a little bit different, that have more detailed information about the income information from the people that were interviewed. We go to the homes several times. PNAD, as known, and the first interview and the last interview, they ask about incomes, about investments, benefits, work assistance. It's very detailed. And then we analyzed how is the income profile of the families in Brazil and evaluate how they behave. So basically, is that the idea? We are going to compare with the PNAD research. We have independent statistics that's not based on the governmental registration. And then we are going to see the difference that emerge and see what's happening. And then maybe to see if that's a problem, if it's a failure. Here we could have some limitations to analyze or to control. As João said, there's some things that sometimes it not exists in the registration. So we don't have a way to verify. So it's a motivation to think about this policy and to do in a different way, because the policy has this fragility. And then basically to see if the differences are indicating the mistakes. Obviously, in this case, we are not going to see small things, like a little failure. We have some people of a population of billions. We are not going to have a reasonable information. We always have mistakes. So the numbers always have some mistakes around. So little differences are irrelevant. But when we have a systematic failure, it has a door to undo payments. So let's start with some examples. Rodrigo said about this project, Coopera, was the emergency bonus when the pandemic started. And a very big concern, federal concern, with the people that would have a big loss with the pandemic. So we had the law. Before the law were published, we have the discussion about have or not assistance because of the pandemic and the lockdown. And then when we start this discussion, before the law be applied, us from the court were discussing how we could design this law. If there was a bill in the Congress and then was transformed in law, we were following these bills and the idea that was thinking in the Congress and verify. And one important thing that we had in that time was the estimative of the federal government to base the extraordinary credit. How much and when the people should receive the benefit, had the benefit. The policies of Coopera, beyond the auditing, as Rodrigo said, we also had the other one that I'm going to present now, where we tried to remake and analyze the estimative, how many people should receive, what's the expense that the government will have with this assistance. So to try to answer this question, we looked at the PNAD of 2019 because it had more detailed income information. I'm supposing something very important, that this PNAD has a reasonable representative, because it's important to say that March 2020 was before the pandemic started. In the first bill of the law, we are focused on the informal jobs, and then look to these people before the pandemic. The emergency assistance looked before the beginning of the pandemic. We thought that maybe it was reasonable, at least until the beginning of the pandemic. So we took this data. I put this slide here just to cause some impact. I'm not going to look at the criteria in details, but the most important thing is to look at the articles of the law and help in areas that were available. And looking at the research data, see who were the people that we could pay and get a beneficiaries estimatives, like the first one, older than 18 years, which is very simple. Some of them were more complicated. For example, the parts of had a formal job, We don't have a question to know that, but we have some data about the contract, if they are civil servants. So we use some variables to try to make this cohort. The ones that have the formal jobs are out of the benefits. And here in the item 6, we have a more specific thing to separate who is going to receive. We knew that if the employee has the official information, we know that if they have some criteria to try to determine, as I said, I'm not going into details. I have the number of the process and the ones that made the process, so we can read this report. The last two ones, as João mentioned, are two criteria to receive this assistance. It was paid for the family. Each family could ask once to receive this assistance, limited to 2 people of the same family receive. If the woman was the head of the family, she could receive double. In the beginning, when the family could receive 600 adults older than 18, as we said, the family could receive 1,200 with 2 people inside these characteristics, or a woman head of the family has to be children underage and doesn't have a husband. So 1,200 were the limit to receive. Another option is to receive 1,800 if this woman was single and had another adult in the family. Should the woman receive this assistance, she needs to be a mother with no husband. And the other adult in the family could be an older son or an older daughter. So this mother with no husband could receive a double quote, and the other adult, that could be anyone in the family, could receive another quote. So the family received 1,800 in total. So these 4 characteristics to these 3 values of receiving. A unique quote, 600 reais, a double quote for 2 people, or a mother head of the family, or 3 quotes, 1,800. So here is the structure of the emergency assistance when it was made. Here are some estimatives that we made. How many benefits should be paid? We separate by the 3 kinds of audience, public that we are going to have. How did that work? When we start this assistance, we already have Bolsa Família, and it was paid for over more than these numbers, almost 20 million of families. And when the emergency assistance started, we had an issue. These assistants were more wide than Bolsa Família. We had a lot of informal incomes workers that have issued with the pandemic and the lockdown. But a lot of these people were known by the government. The for people with low income, probably were inside Bolsa Família in receiving this assistance. But the people with a little higher income are not in Bolsa Família, were in the Cadastro Único. I think that mainly program inside Bolsa Família, we have other assistance programs that demands the registrations. BPC now needs a registrations. Cadastro Único. We have another programs of like electric power. We have several kinds of assistance. So we have like a registration with families with low income that sometimes they're not in the Bolsa Família. But we have people in the informal works that don't have a low income and didn't have any registration. So could be very far off the criteria of the programs and didn't have any reason to register on these programs. And when the pandemic and lockdown, loss of income, they were lost. And in this time, we had the launch of Caixa app, which was digital through a cell phone app. We had a website to allow that these people that were outside of the registration that exists, that were outside, and then they could subscribe and receive this assistance inside the rules that we had. So it was very important to make the analysis. When we analysis the PNAD, in the general population, we had these numbers. So these totals of Bolsa Família Cadastro Único that are presented here, we had no use in Cadastro Único. Everyone used that to make cross data. We use not only that, it was based on PNAD and the amount of income. So we can put in the right program. And then people that don't have any profile but had informal work, entrepreneurs, so they subscribed, and then we got this estimative of how many people should receive. And then we did this estimative, and then we pay in the first parcel of the emergency assistance. So we made this payment. The first parcel was in April 2020. The families found in Bolsa Família, families that found in Cadastro Único, and families that subscribe in Caixa app. And then we got to this total of payment, 6 million above, higher from what we thought about. Maybe more people were receiving this assistance that they should receive, trusting on the picture that we had. It's very true. It's a true picture, but had some distortion. As I said, if we try to analyze everything on Bolsa Família, we could find it was very close. And here we have an issue in Cadastro Único e Caixa. This Cadastro Único, that we have a difference of 2,300,000. I prefer that we were more close to the right number, but it's not reasonable. When we define the ones who were part of the subscription of Cadastro Único, It was based in the rules that were in Cadastro Único, the limitation of income, which is higher than Bolsa Família. But, as I said, people that are on the top of incomes that could subscribe in Cadastro Único, they have no use to subscribe on that because this top is not attended in the governmental assistance. So we have a group of family that have a higher income inside the chains of low income. Inside these people from Cadastro Único, there is no use to subscribe because they don't have perspective to receive any assistance because of the Cadastro Único. So it's reasonable that the difference between people that register or not, we have a little more people because everybody that is in the criteria is inside the Cadastro Único. If they are in the limit, are not going to be benefited, do not subscribe. So 2 million people in the necessity need, when the pandemic come, try to subscribe by Caixa app. It's a probable cause for that. So the registration in Caixa was 8 million above we hoped. So we have this result, which is the most interesting of this first analysis that we did. Talking about João said, in our estimative, we had 3 million of single mothers in PNAD. 3 million of single mothers looking at the family composition. We ask about incomes, about the people who lives in the home, and every family relations related about the responsible. And we got to 3 million of single mothers. In the first parcel, we paid over 9 million to single mothers. Much higher than we expect. And here it's easy to say how that can happen. The assistance was declaratory. So let's think about the situation. I have a mother with children at home with informal work, but her husband, no, don't have any contract. So she, if the family income are inside the rules, this rule of half of minimum wage or 3 minimum wage, if I put that on the rule, even with the income of the husband, she could receive the assistance. She could subscribe, and then her husband didn't receive, even if the family were inside the rule. If she declared her and the husband, she's going to receive a quote. The husband will not receive anything because he outside of the goal of the program. If she didn't declare her husband, so she started to receive 1,200 because she declares herself as a single mother. I would like to say that it was an absurd if that happened. We trust that people do not do that, but in reality, that's not it. I understand the opportunity that some people did that. This is our perspective. Several people did that because we know that from several years, several researches, we see that the women are in the informal jobs. So women in informal jobs and husbands with contracts. Men are more in the formal market. So obviously it's incentive to women receive as a head of the family, or if she have an adult son, and do not declare her husband. And we can say that the incomes of the husband not so high. We have worse cases that the husband has an income above 3 minimum wages, so it took out the whole family outside the assistance. So we have the women that is informal, lost their income, her income, but he didn't have the right because her husband has an income over 3 minimum wage. So she received 1,800 if she has an older son. And here is the idea of the use. That's why I said the independent statistics use. In the Caixa app to receive the benefits, she knows the rules and she's answering the questions, registers with which goal. The final answer to the PNAD doesn't have any goal. It didn't have any specific goal. She didn't have any incentive. So we have some researches about some informations and the home researches, but they are lower than when you are doing registrations for the assistance. And we can see that clearly about the single mothers. It's a very hard information to verify and very easy to be hidden. So we have some important issues with the payment that we're doing over. So the emergency assistance continues to be paid. We have a light change of criteria. First, the idea was to look to March of 2020. We were paying that for 3 months. After, we had a change of understanding, and even the people that lost the formal jobs and see themselves in a complicated situation after March had the right to receive the assistance. People that were fired for longer and didn't have the work assistance, so they lost their incomes in the following months of the pandemic. And we were in the perspective that we would have these assistances of 600 were not limited to June and July.
To receive it in August. So we had a larger number of beneficiaries considering this new understanding of receiving more people. So we completed the simulation based in 2019. The idea for us would to have the number of 2020. After all, we had the same questions here, and in 2019, we started to suppose some serious losses in income. We have information in the income survey, annual surveys. So we started studying the people who were very heavily affected. Employers, I'm really sorry about the interpretation, but the original sound of the speaker is of very low quality, so the interpretation is trying to do its best. And people who were mostly affected by the pandemic and the unemployment benefit. They were fired and they were receiving unemployment benefit. Unemployment benefit was being received in 3 to 5 months, and then the person didn't receive any more money. We received a lot of news about renegotiation of contracts in the rents. And a financial situation as well. So there are many problems in the financial market as well, and we had to disconsider this. And disconsidering this, we decided to
Até julho de 2020, foi mais ou menos quando, um pouco antes da gente soltar esse segundo relatório, o auxílio estava sendo pago a 63 milhões de famílias. Então, aqui, de novo, essa ideia de que tinha mais gente se inscrevendo do que talvez devesse. Pela nossa melhor fotografia da população brasileira que a gente tinha, no caso, que era o final de 2019. Então, indicativos aqui de que ainda tinha brechas que podiam ter implementado as pessoas. Mas, assim, cada um era totalmente continuado.
Here, later, we had some more improvements, and then the third report, we had a change in legislation that allowed mothers between 12 and 17 years old to be beneficiaries. And here there was a change. If it was a mother, it could be above 12 years old, and that's how we created this rule based on family income as well. And some of this information had to be reconsidered, and they had to be the breadwinner of the family, or the person responsible for the family, if they're 20 and this wife of 17 years old, and when after 18 she started being a beneficiary. For example, this family here, in this program, they received a quota, and after that they received two, and they were received by the wife here. Another one, which was the family responsible person for the family, and after that we received this grandchild of this person, and the person responsible for the family, and this infrastructure as well. And then there was a mother, if she has more than 2 kids. Here you have the son-in-law, and it was a beneficiary as well. The idea was if this son-in-law didn't existed, that was the structure that we had in Penage, and then we made the estimates considering the new structures. And this was a small increase in benefits, and it's important to highlight that this increase here is a marginal one. Think about a family that had 2 people receiving this benefit, and it didn't increase much, the number of benefits. There are still two benefits in the family. Yeah, the situation is the same. The interpretation is trying to do its best, but the sound of the speaker is of horrible quality, and we can barely understand what he's saying. Okay, but we'll keep trying. This configuration here, in which you would have a person and you would have 2 quotas, and you have a woman that was single. The number of families that benefited from it was different, but this number here is very important because, as we have seen here, that was the number of the December 2020, the emergency benefit. We had 67 million people, And that was the estimate of PNAD. We removed all of the factors that I talked about in the report. Everybody got the unemployment benefit. So there were many different incomes, right? In a scenario that was really bad. And the number of beneficiaries was also complicated, right? The difference was very expressive. And that was a situation that I mentioned before. The person here has a very big incentive not to declare, to say that they have a spouse, because it makes a very big difference in the benefit. So we had this difference here, and we can see how the family makeup in PNAD in the emergency registry. Here we have our final conclusion that it is really complicated, and especially the family condition. There is no database. Okay, finally the sound has improved. And we're not only talking about a wedding or formal papers, a marriage. People go live together and they separate, and a lot of this is not declared, especially now. That is a much more factual situation. Even if we had situation 6 months ago, we cannot guarantee that the same information, if they got divorced or separated, or if they're together. There is a very complicated criteria, and especially in the emergency situation, in terms of for the limitation of 4 benefits per family. And you encourage people to family that have 3 adults. You have 3 adults, and that are all have all of the met all of the criteria, because you cannot declare in the same family. They're going to receive 2 benefits, right? It's better for 2 to declare in a different way and another person to declare also. And it's not possible to see that they live together. We don't have a registration. So that is the first criteria that is complicated. And the first one is the characterization of women as in this situation here. And there is a criteria that it is complicated, you know, and it ends up harming. And here I'd like to highlight that it's important to do this. The idea here is not a single mother to need it or not, but the planning of the policy, you can see that was a policy in a specific way. And what changes here, or the execution of this program, is to generate some of the inequalities in this program. And the situation that I'm talking here is that it is possible to have 3 million people that were receiving or earning 1,200 reais, and they didn't need it as much as the other ones that are these other 4 million, which are single mothers who didn't have a spouse that lived with them. And you have a registry that could be better applied in this situation. So the main idea is that this policy has to be effective. So this is the end of this work. We did the estimates, and they had very interesting results. And at the end of the turn of the year 2021, we had the emergency benefit, and the 2021 when the vaccination came out and the pandemic was slowing down. the economic recovery, there was a very strong discussion about a new program of income transfer after this one here, the emergency benefit, not as Bolsa Familia as it was before. In this post-pandemic moment, there should be a different program, where there should be a different program. And all of this in a very tight situation that was very sensitive. We had an economic crisis, and the payments in above the benefits, emergency benefits, were really high, and the budget of the government went up. And so we had a situation that was very complicated, and we had to understand how we would do this in a different way. And after all of these reports that I mentioned here, we had a team that was really good to perform an analysis here of PNAD in general, all of the years. There is a structure that is basic. So we had a team that was very well experienced, and to see what the people were like and who was within the criteria of the program, and that generated a very big opportunity within TCU. That was the report of public executions. And that's the opportunity for us to have an analysis, and all of the programs. And that's something we needed to analyze, what was good within each program and how effective they were, and they promote equity, and how we can use the information and this knowledge for the discussion of a new program of income transfer. So we performed an analysis, ones that we already have. And Bolsa Familia naturally was included in this assessment. That's the main program of income transfer. Also the continued payment benefit, and also the unemployment benefit. In terms, also the rural social benefits, and also the deduction of the income, the tax income. And I wanted to analyze each one of these.
Our law of poverty in this study in Bolsa Familia that was defined at the time was and we understood that a discussion about the difference of income need, a discussion what's the line of poverty to be used. In the time we chose to $5.50 by day. It's the World Bank suggestion to countries of higher incomes inside the context of low income. Brazil is in this rate, which is 386 reais monthly. And then it's a gap of poverty. I'm going to explain that. And the measure of disequality, everybody knows. I'm not going to explain that. What's the gap of poverty? A very simple example. What happens is that both populations had 50% of the low-income people, $50 by day, and here we have 50% of poverty, and here the same thing. When we look at that, we can see that this population are not the same. Both of them has 50% of poor population. These people here is below the line, and here is very far from the line. So we have to see what this proportion does. And the idea is to make the account from that distance, which separates the people above the line of the line. Here is the formula, and then we are going to put this difference proportion After this formula, I'm going to ask you to speed up because of our time. When I saw this count, if you're going to explain, and here's the second population, the gap has this difference. This one is more poor and this one is less poor. So we use this count. And these are our results. Looking at 2019, the gap of poverty in Brazil is 9.5%. We make these calculus based on PNAD. The ones who receive all the kinds of assistances. And we've changed the value of these programs depending on the amount of payment, how much that interfere in the gap of poverty. How much should I expend by year to reduce 1 percentage point into the poverty? I want to decrease that to 8.5. It depends on the program. Bolsa Família, with the most focus on the poor population, it's the most economic. With 12 millions more by year, I reduce the gap of poverty. If with BPC, I had to invest 24, seguro-desemprego 53, abono salarial 61. It is how focused is the program to reduce the gap of poverty. This is our first result. Here we have the design of several programs to income transfer, but to decrease poverty, the PBF is the most efficiency. We look at the ones to receive each program, change the values, and see how that behaves. And in 2019, 0.543, and the same idea here. If I want to decrease this index, I have to expend 27 reais, BPC 38. So Bolsa Família is the most efficiency to reduce. So that's the main questions that we need to work with. We have some indicators that Bolsa Família is the best one to reduce poverty and inequality. And about the future, I'm not going to present that because it's in the course. We have Auxílio Brasil. We are planning all this methodology that I present. We're going to apply in the future, undoing payment, verify the undoing payment. And we have, this is all in the news. We have several specialists talking about this program. Audit is not guided by news. We are here to identify, confirm or not confirm the politics that exist. Of course, the court is going to evaluate all these informations. And the idea is for us to continue evaluating the home research from IBGE to evaluate these assistance and programs. Here, I have the process with the several agreements. And if you have any questions, this is my mail. Thank you very much. I'm sorry. I know that the team is very important. I saw that you controlled and very well your excitement. When we are in the top of the results, you put a formula that decrease the excitement. You did very well. Thank you very much. Giuseppe, it was very good, this experience. First, to bring this methodology, which is mainly related to the formulation of public policy. So we have this data, the sampler researchers, to have the amount of resource, how we are going to reach the goals, and it's very interesting to use that to compare the public policies and also see this part of the payment regularity. Obviously, we are not accurate with the registration data, but we can see possible issues that could be occurring and address them. We do not have time, so I would like to ask just one question that go through all the speakers. Teams, I would like that Eliane starts to talk about that because it's related to the internal control. Because all of us, the internal control and external control, gives a lot of energy to identify the problems, to show them, and show the amounts of loss that we have. But what the population wants, what the society waits, that's this problem stopped, and the resources goes to the most efficiency way that they could. I would like to ask, through all the benefits, the expense with human resources, the assistances, which is the best way to internalize these results that you all showed, along with the executors of the public policies. How us as internal and external control could contribute to have the best practices to stop the big numbers of irregular payments or inefficient public policies. And I would like that Eliane start, please. Please honor us with your words. I think that we think about that, we share with the manager our auditing trails, our results, and always try to find, along with the managers, to identify how can they identify the identification of beneficiaries, the payrolls, and see how we can contribute. As I said recently, 2 works, the bonus that we are closing this work, and the work that we are doing along with the truck driver and the taxi driver were in this sense to share results and trails, to discuss the origin of data, seek the information, to have cross data, and understand the importance of that or not. And I think somehow we reach this issue, but I think that the most efficiency way to the future, the past we need to treat it different but from the cross data for the future, I think that's the best alternative. Eliane, Ricardo, would you like to complement? Following the order, you could talk. We have a big audience, so it's interesting to hear from the managers what they could do to improve. The ones who want to start auditing of payments, would you say some words? Eliane was very precise in her comments. I agree with all speeches, but I want to add something. We have a lot of resistance to share data in the government, so the entities resist to share their data, and that makes hard the detection of undue payments. So I think that beyond from what Eliane said, all give hands and go to the sharing easier. TCU, we also have a hard time to share this data, but we have to work on that in the whole public administration to improve the efficiency, to increase the detections of irregularities. So I see that we need to work on this sense. Rodrigo, Giuseppe. I think what as Akel said, we have this concern for a while. We look at some bottlenecks, social SIC, these bases. It's a structural work, but it's a step before to think in a unique way to deal with this registration data of the state. So I think I don't know how to do, because everyone wants the protagonism depending on the constitutional competence. So to reach this path, we are going to play hard. We are going to put a lot of people thinking together. Giuseppe, I think I talked too much. I'm going to talk very quickly that I agree with that. We saw some initiatives from Data Lake to put all the data together, but we have a lot of resistance inside the entities, and we have to keep going to share very quickly. I remember the amendment 53 that talks about the integrated data systems of 3 governmental spheres, including pension data, work data, assistant data in a unique base that address a big part of the problems that you mentioned. I think that there is a guideline from TCU
asking for the calendar of the institution. And the last news that we have is that it's ongoing. Considering that it's not finished, we hope the federal government will be able to implement it the best way possible, the system, to help the management of data. So we continue now to the end. We were supposed to finish at 5 o'clock, just 5 p.m. here in Brasilia. And I thank you hugely, every speaker, and especially all of the audience here that came here to watch us, and a little bit of our speakers, absorbing some of the knowledge. And I hope that we managed to convey a message to improve the management of public management. Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone.